deeds were possessed by something that was not human. Now the church has really seen what really is, I think, the major discovery of modern psychology is that human beings are very varied. They extend to the outer limits of brilliance and of great significance, and to the outer limits of doing what really, I think, evil is a perfectly good term for describing.
You're happy with the term evil, are you? I mean, have you used a term like that?
I'm very happy with the term evil to describe people who very consciously and deliberately over a very long period of time abuse and exploit and take vicious advantage of other people.
All right, let me go back to George Pitcher then. Do you worry at all about the element of voyeurism that must be present when people find themselves drawn to the most appalling excesses of human behaviour and just sometimes almost seem to lap it up?
Well, I think there is that kind of prurience, that kind of desire to know. It sort of competes with the desire to look away and to shun it, but almost you're compelled to look at it. And I think that compulsion probably is driven by a desire really to know what we as human beings are capable of.
And to separate ourselves from those excesses,
well,
to say there's somebody who's really bad, that means I'm not so bad?
Well, I think that it's important for us to recognise what we're capable of so that we can be eternally vigilant with regard to resisting any tendency that we might have to fall into the kind of freedoms, and I use that word in inverted commas, that lead us to those sorts of actions.
Right. But David Cantor, do you recognise that prurience, that voyeurism, is an inevitable ingredient in our psychological makeup?
I would take it a stage further and say that it's a mark of a civilised society that we take such interest in this phenomenon. We could argue that in totalitarian societies they've been able to get away with horrors because the people at large turn away from them and don't take an interest. It's actually civilising to try and understand what Joseph Fritzl has done and how he's got away with it, and how a society has actually ignored the potential of these sorts of possibilities that allowed him to continue with these horrors over a long period of time.
The psychologist Professor David Cantor of Liverpool University, together with the Reverend George Pitcher of the Daily Telegraph. And there is plenty more background and analysis of the Fritzl case online at bbc.co.uk/news. Remember, you can access that wherever you are, either from your computer or from your mobile phone. And I'm going to be writing about the case in my newsletter and on my blog tomorrow. To find that or to subscribe to my newsletter, just go to our website at bbc.co.uk/World Tonight. Now, an investigation by BBC News has revealed that credit card details obtained from people in the UK have been offered for sale in India. The details were taken illegally.
The truth is that the people who tell jokes for a living have a way of connecting with the audience that sometimes we lack. And increasingly in recent years, politicians, even presidents now, sitting presidents of the United States, want to tap into that sort of cultural connection that these comedians and satirists have with the American public.
But is it true that TV journalists have left a gap, that they have not been doing the job that viewers want them to have been doing?
There's all sorts of shortcomings in the American media, and the big financial crisis that seemed to come out of nowhere here in the States is certainly one of them. I don't think any of us, television, print alike, did as good a job as we could have done in putting together the pieces, the warning signs, the red flags of this crisis. But let's be clear. People who work in journalism, have certain obligations. They have to be fair, they have to be balanced, they have to give the other side. Comedians don't need to do that. They can skewer anybody they want. They can be one-sided about it, as long as they can get some laughs, as long as they can get some people to tune in. And Jon Stewart is very good at that.
But there is a danger, isn't there? And that is that a lot of people watching a show like Jon Stewart's show will think he's a journalist, will think that what he says is true, is journalism.
Jon Stewart would be the first to tell you, he certainly has told me, that he does not consider himself anything other than an entertainer. But the fact is that a topical show like that uses videotape of politicians and sometimes journalists saying dumb things or inconsistent things can perform a journalistic-like function. It can hold up to ridicule those people in the public eye who are doing things or saying things that the American public would find ridiculous. And that ridicule, that mockery, is a very powerful weapon. It's not quite journalism, but sometimes it kind of smells like journalism.
To what extent, though, are the people who really are lapping up the Jon Stewarts and the Jay Lenos of this world, people on the left, the liberal left, people who find that the traditional mainstream broadcast media, in their eyes, just simply aren't reflecting the world as they see it?
I don't think that's true in the case of Jay Leno, because he has a show on one of the big broadcast networks, and he tells jokes that equally skewer Republicans and Democrats. Jon Stewart is a different case. Much more opinionated, clearly liberal. I spent most of the last 8 years making fun of George Bush, attacking the Iraq War through the use of humor and ridicule, as I say. And one of the challenges for him, in fact, and he started to do a little bit of it, is how funny he can be with a Democratic president, with Barack Obama in power. But this incident with the business coverage and Jim Cramer and CNBC, which generated so much hype and attention here in the States, gave Jon Stewart a chance to have a new target in this Democratic age.
Do you detect a sense among some television journalists that they do need perhaps to sharpen up their act, to begin to do what traditionally I think they regarded British TV journalists as doing, which is to ask hard questions?
That has already happened, but it's not so much the asking of hard questions. But when you get to the newscast, the newscasts here are still kind of in a very traditional mold. And I have already seen some of the news programs in the United States taking a page from Jon Stewart's Daily Show, using the quick-cut editing to show politicians trying to squirm out of something. So I do think he is having an effect, to some degree, on real news programs here in America.
But those real news programs presumably will draw the line at having a studio audience whooping at every good line.
Yes, and they also don't do another thing that Jon Stewart does, which is he will have a correspondent in Baghdad, and actually he's standing on a stage with a fake backdrop projected behind him. We frown on that in the real journalistic community, but Stewart manages to get some laughs out of it.
Howard Kurtz of The Washington Post. Now tonight's main headline again.